All right, guys. This is Game Time Discussions. We're excited to have a discussion today about the first ever Game Time Discussions mock draft 1.0 for the 2024 draft. Um, this is my favorite time of the year.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, it might be more important. Like it might be my favorite over fantasy football drafting and everything. This is where I really enjoy. I really like watching players and seeing their development, um, deciding if I think they're better than one another. Because at the end of the day, it's all going to be about situational and things like that that we can't really um, put into our watching on film. But this is definitely one of my favorite things to do during the off season and just getting bearings on the new players that are coming in the league.
Mhm.
And so we're excited to get going on all that. There's a lot of really good players. And so I definitely think that, we're going to, a lot of positional value in this class. Depth at positions that matter, quarterback, we're going to see really early, wide receiver, tackle, corner, all these positions that you really think of as the main positions, they're going to be heavily valued in this class.
So. Right. Yeah. And like just to piggyback off what Em said, it's such a fun time. We're building a big old puzzle piece. Not only trying to figure out who goes where, but just scouting guys, developing guys, all that stuff, seeing best case scenario, worst case scenario, all those kinds of things. There's endless kind of content that we love talking about. And, while Game Time Discussions is just starting, we've been doing mocks together for about 5 years now and talking about them. And hopefully this summer we'll be doing some videos of reactions of past mocks that we've had just to see where we were right, where we were wrong, what we were thinking at the time. All that stuff is kind of what we love to talk about. We talk about endlessly. So, like Em said, this is a really, really good class. Fascinating with all the important positions. So there's going to be a lot of movement. One disclaimer on this one, at least, there's not going to be any trades in this mock. We're going to stay away from that. We're going to forecast some predictions of where some veterans go. Obviously, Justin Fields is a hot topic because if Chicago goes with quarterback at the first pick, he's probably not going to be there. So who do we think he's going to go there? Kind of, doing an if-then statement just to try to put some pieces together for now. Once the combine starts next week, once we react to that, we'll come out with another mock and then a third one right before the draft. And those might include some trades, maybe some fun talking points. Maybe we'll disagree on some spots, but we were pretty consensus on the majority of this, especially early on. So that's just kind of where we're at. And let's just kind of start off with the first pick and get to it.
Well, yeah, but one thing before that.
Okay.
We're really focused on getting position right over player. I think that's something that a lot of people, and I will tell you also, no analyst is perfect. I will own my mistakes. I have had plenty of mistakes on players in the past, and that's just kind of the beast that it is. But when we do these mocks, we're looking for more positional value. So expecting like certain teams to go with quarterback over another position. Getting that right rather than just the player's name is also very important to us because I think that shows that we were on the right track, but not necessarily the guy that was on the top of their board.
Right. And also it's like some of the times we kind of defer in the style in which we mock draft because Emory a lot of times is like, what's the best fit? And a lot of times I'm like, this is what I think will happen.
Yeah.
And so absolutely. There's a little of both that needs to go into a solid mock draft. And like Em said, if you get 9 right, that's fantastic out of 32 teams, just because there's so much that can be a chain reaction, especially if there's a blockbuster trade that happens and say somebody moves up to New England at 3 and takes the quarterback and then all this, or New England says, I want the receiver. And then bam, everything Arizona's on the trade. Yeah. All that can change in an instant. So we just try to focus on plugging and playing, doing a little of both the best fit versus what we think will happen. And sometimes teams won't listen. Sometimes teams will. Yeah. And sometimes prospects work out. Sometimes they don't. So
I wish the Raiders would listen more often.
Oh, yeah.
But
it's been rough.
So we're going to start off. as you can see on the screen now, we've got our top 10 here. The first three are all quarterbacks. Then you get the first wide receiver off the board in Marvin Harrison Jr., who is our top prospect on the whole board, on the big board. Um, Joe Alt out of Notre Dame goes to the Chargers. We've got Malik Neighbors going to the Giants. Fashanu, the offensive tackle out of Penn State, goes to the Titans. Dallas Turner, the first defensive player off the board, to the Falcons. Roma Dunze out of Washington to the Falcons, so they get their pairing, their rookie pairing. And then finally, the Jets get to address offensive tackle with Fuaga. So, as you see now, we're going to talk about the three quarterbacks going early. So you've got Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Drake May. I think this is where the debate really starts. I think a lot of people have been changing up their tune a little bit. Caleb Williams had definitely dropped his stock a little bit this season, but at the same time, there are some things that you just can't coach that he does with his arm talent, and so I think that that's very important to how teams are going to draft. He can throw it 60 yards in the air and drop it on a pen, and that's something that you can work on. But to see it happen pretty consistently by him is something that kind of just you see and you're like, wow, that's so impressive as a scout. So he's definitely going to be, to me, the number one quarterback and first in this draft.
Yeah, and what I would say to that is it's more likely than not. I feel more comfortable about Caleb Williams being the first pick, and the debate is more about, is Chicago going to take them? And I think that Chicago stays, but I think there's more of a chance that Chicago is moving off the pick, which will not happen to me, than Caleb Williams doesn't get picked first overall. Right. And then there's Drake May first off the board. I don't think that there's that kind of thing in store. I think he separated himself enough, despite, statistically still a formidable year, but obviously they had a very down year in the win total performance. There was a lot of character concerns, sound bites that just kind of get run with him, that basically when you're as good of a prospect, you start nitpicking at every little thing. And so you get put under a microscope, and, one of your last second losses, crying to your mom on the sideline. I don't take that as a crybaby thing, but when you instill some kind of confidence, that will rub some people the wrong way when you react the complete opposite after certain results.
Of course. I mean, in 2022, he was almost perfect. I mean, he Heisman, the Heisman winner, 42 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, just doing video game things. And so he did take a little bit of a step back in just production this year. But I don't fault him at all. There was one game this year that I was like, okay, that was his mulligan game almost. And that was against Notre Dame. Notre Dame had 3 picks against him. That was a definite waking up moment for him. And he just never found a point in the game where he was just comfortable, got the ball out, just looked good, I guess is the best way to put it. That was definitely his mulligan game. And I think that that one game can't define a guy that played 3 years,
but when you're
definitely perfect. I mean, just perfect guy, like throwing the football. Oklahoma, then goes to USC, follows Lincoln Riley, and is just as good, if not better. Or definitely better. Let me rephrase that. I mean, he was great at Oklahoma, but he was better the second year. Took a step back, and he was still a top quarterback in the nation, just even knowing he took a step back. So
exactly. And like I said, it's all about nitpicking at this point. There's nothing from a production standpoint, from a play standpoint, that he's done to not be the first pick.
Right.
It's just characteristics and intangibles are what people are looking for. And when you have, I want part ownership of a team that I go to, forcing your way to a situation will rub teams the wrong way. And who knows if that's directly coming from him or if that's
Right.
just a family member trying to do a soundbite.
Of course.
Obviously, we look at Patrick Mahomes, and he's an absolute perfect. Like, you couldn't ask for a better situation at quarterback, and how he presents himself, how he is a great leader, all that stuff. But a lot of people bag on the brother,
Mm-hmm.
and then his wife's a little loud, and it's just like you look at those things, and you're just trying to take down something that's so good.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times when people stay good for a long period of time, they don't like seeing them sustain that.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
Tom Brady is regarded as the GOAT, but when he was winning Super Bowls, people didn't want to see him there.
Yeah.
I can tell you that much. Maybe in hindsight, it's like, oh yeah, he's fantastic. But in the moment, don't tell me that everybody wasn't rooting for Atlanta to
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you weren't nervous and like, oh, please stop him, please. You weren't like, okay, go do your thing. That's not how the public reacts to
Right.
things. So those are kind of some of the things that I think he needs to work on, is just kind of presentation about himself.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless, he's going one. Who's going there? Probably going to be Chicago.
Yeah.
And with that being said, where is Justin Fields going to go? And what can you get for him? That's kind of what I think is a bigger debate right now compared to, is Chicago going to stay at one?
Right. And we, in our, just for disclaimer, we have Justin Fields being traded to either the Steelers or the Falcons.
Yeah.
And
Right now, those are pretty heavy favorites for him.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can enter quarterback needy team here.
Yeah, absolutely.
But at this point, he's being traded, not cut. And somebody's probably going to have to give up a second round pick, and not likely a first for him. Maybe a little extra resources as well, but you won't have to have your all important first round pick to invest in him.
Right.
And so that's kind of where we're at with that. What I really want to know about is the Jaden Daniels versus Drake May, because they're very different quarterbacks in very different situations, and they're both going 2-3. So who's getting them? Why are they going one of another?
So Jaden Daniels, to me, so if he would have come out last year, when he kind of expected to, I believe, like he kind of talked about it. I mean, he is going to be, he's 23. He'll be 23 and a half basically when the season starts. So he's a little bit older of a quarterback. And we expected him to kind of come out of school last year, and I think he would have been a fifth round pick. And coming back to school made him a lot of money. Absolutely made him a lot of money. And he was easily the most electrifying player in college football this year. He did have his one down game also, and it was against Florida State. And if you consider it a down game, okay.
And it was way back early September.
It was the first game of the year. And but he was putting up video game numbers. This is the video game guy. He had two electrifying receivers that we'll get to. He was just the best football player in college football this year. And I think his ability to run the ball, and the fact that the league is very copycat-esque, they see a guy, they take him, and they're like, where can we get another one? Right? And so if you look at these three quarterbacks you have, well, and Caleb Williams, the easy comparison because of his arm talent and style is Patrick Mahomes.
Yep.
And then you go to Jaden Daniels and you're like, okay, who's this? Well, this is Lamar Jackson of the class. Now, these are projections and ideas. They're not necessarily.
That's not ceiling.
Yeah, these are. Yeah,
these are style of play.
Yeah, style of play type of guys. I mean, Jaden Daniels had 1,100 plus rushing yards this year. Like that tells you everything you need to know about his style of play to me. And then you have Drake May, who reminds me directly of Justin Herbert. Big, strong arm, over like how he throws and everything, can move pretty well in the pocket. He also has some of the same concerns, though, that Justin Herbert has. And that's part of the biggest reason for me that Drake May's behind Jaden Daniels has actually nothing to do so much with, they're the same level prospect. I watch Jaden Daniels put up 45 points a game every week. And Drake May, on the other hand, he played in the ACC, which was down by every
weakest
mean,
conference in football.
by far. And,
at least of the Power 5.
Yeah.
Now Power 4.
Yeah, but he played in the ACC, which was a down year for them,
Mhm.
and he doesn't win the big games. Out of his games against ranked teams, he has lost all but one in his last 2 years,
Mhm.
and that's something that really hurt. Like, makes it hard for me because Justin Herbert had similar issues. Justin Herbert in the bowl game, I can't remember which bowl. I'm
I think
sorry,
it was the Rose Bowl.
Rose Bowl,
Mhm.
threw the ball out of the back of the end zone on the last play of the game instead of giving his receiver a chance. That's the type of play. You're a top 10 pick. You need to make at least give your receiver a chance. Get the ball in the area. And I see
You hearing
similar.
Quinn Ewers?
Uh,
Sorry, we'll talk
sorry.
about that later.
Yeah. But
That's next year.
but Drake kind of has some of those issues, and I guess I see less of those issues in Jaden. I know that they didn't win nearly as many games, but they also had a historically terrible defense for LSU's standards.
Mhm.
And that's something that kind of allows me to get over that, I guess, because he was putting up 30 plus points a game against some of the best SEC teams in the nation. So I think that's something. And he was the number one ranked or number one graded PFF quarterback this year at 94.7. Things like that just really stand out to who he is. And I love his style of play. I love the ability to be able to take off and run and make defenses vacate zones. Think about it. Like, if you have to have a guy that QB spies you and worries about you, there's a zone missing behind you.
Mhm.
And that allows more options, more things to happen. And we see that every day nowadays in the NFL. He's not going to be a guy though. He's more polished as an actual thrower than Lamar was when he came out. Lamar
Mhm.
went 32nd, and that had a lot to do with the fact that he couldn't accurately throw the ball.
Yeah, and there was no one of his kind. A lot of people compared him to Michael Vick,
Right.
but Michael Vick was also one of his kind,
Right.
and he was the first really of his generation to throw and run the
Right.
way he could. Obviously, you had Fran Tarkenton and Randall Cunningham, but
Not the same.
that's like one every 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
and then 20 years later, you got Lamar Jackson, and you have all these prototypes that were in his class, like Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just like that's the style of quarterback. If you put Lamar Jackson in this class and he had the same exact production, but Louisville, he was in 2023, knowing what we know now, he would be arguably the like there. I could see an argument for why somebody would want him over Caleb Williams.
Right. Absolutely.
But because it was 4 or 5 years ago and that's not the way the league was then, that's why teams didn't want to take a chance, and he fell all the way to 32.
I think similarly to that, if Jaden Daniels has the same season, similar seasons to like Lamar did, like we're saying, Lamar did it multiple years in a row.
Oh yeah,
If Jaden did it in one just this year and it shot him to second, if he did it multiple years in a row, we'd be talking about Jaden Daniels going number one overall right now.
Mhm.
Not, but that's the thing. We have, of course, it's a little recency bias. That's why he's up here. But we also want to see it consistently. And that's why we wouldn't put him over Caleb Williams in this case. But I can make the case for putting him over Drake May because I didn't see the consistent winning out of Drake May that I wanted to see. And that's my problem.
and one thing I would just kind of retort to that is I don't think that today's quarterbacks are really conducive to just winning,
Right.
doing it all. And like we look at Josh Allen and how he comes from, smaller non football school,
Wyoming.
and vaults to a top 10 pick, and a lot of people considered him a reach, despite being 6'5", 240, and despite running as fast as he can, knowing what he can be, because people were like, well, he didn't win, wasn't that productive, didn't go to a good school, but it worked out. There's a lot of quarterbacks like that. Patrick Mahomes went to Texas Tech.
Yeah.
And he got drafted behind Mitchell Trubisky.
Yeah.
It's because he was like throwing for 5,000 yards, but he was 7-5, 8-4. Not that impressive. But Mitchell Trubisky, who's prototypical quarterback and went to North Carolina, they had better seasons. So people went with him. A lot of times winning is in the I guess recency bias makes it seem like this guy over this guy because he won more.
Right.
And Caleb Williams, to me, instantly vaults into being a top 15 NFL quarterback year one. And USC went
Lost,
7-5.
Yeah, lost 5 games.
So that's I don't think winning is as conducive to winning,
right,
or is as conducive as how people view prospects anymore in today's game.
Right. I think my biggest thing is the games that he wasn't winning. It wasn't so much just like winning, because last year, I mean, they still win. They still won 8+ games both years. So it's not like I'm saying like he can't win. It's that if I'm going to split the hairs for second and third pick, because that's the thing too. We're talking about the number 3 overall pick. Like, it's not like we're talking about a guy that's, dropping down boards or anything. Yes. No, he's still 3.
This isn't 2005 where Alex Smith versus Aaron Rodgers for the first pick, and then nobody's going to pick for the next 20 quarterback. That's not one's going 2 and one's going 3. It doesn't matter what the order is, but it's just kind of stylistically, how are we going to see that? And Washington, like we've said before, Cliff Kingsbury likes to have mobile quarterbacks, exciting, explosive offenses. So it kind of, coming from a 45-point-a-game offense, it kind of fits the mold more than...
Right, absolutely. And that's another thing, too, is like we have to think about fit for every one of these picks. And that's something we talked about at the beginning. Jaden Daniels, to me, fits going to Washington more. And I think that New England would be very happy if Drake May fell to 3 of them, because he fits a similar mold to... He fits the mold of the Trevor Lawrence, the Josh Allen, the Justin Herbert mold, the tall, big-armed quarterback that has some good mobility, not going to be a stationary guy. But I think that if you're thinking about Washington, I think the guy that fits better is, the best guy is Caleb Williams, because he's from there. He played under Cliff Kingsbury, but that's just not going to be realistic. So Jaden Daniels is the next guy.
Gotcha. So. Yeah, and kind of moving on into the draft, before we have Marvin Harrison Jr., again, we've said that's our number 1 player on the board.
Absolutely.
I don't want to spend too much time on him in this mock draft because Arizona feels like it's an A+ start to their draft if he falls to 4.
Yeah.
The only debate is if New England, for some reason, says, I want to go a different direction at quarterback, he goes at 3. That's his only options to me. I don't see any other situation where it's not New England or Arizona, unless there's a blockbuster trade to move up to him, which we'll see if that happens. We've seen it with Julio Jones, where the Falcons moved from 27 all the way to 6 and gave up multiple first-round picks, and people are like, wow, that was crazy. Why would you do that? And he's one of the best of our generation.
Julio Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and so I think he's that caliber of a prospect.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if he'll have the production of those kinds of guys, but it all depends on the fit. And going to Arizona is absolutely the best situation, at least at the very moment, with Kyler Murray. He came back off his ACL injury and didn't really miss a step, at least throwing the football.
Right.
And that was coming onto a team that was 1-8 when he came back. And they were very competitive towards the end of the season. That was with Marquise Brown being hurt for the most part. Yeah. Trey McBride, a rookie tight end. You had guys like Michael Wilson and Rondell Moore who are being productive out of nowhere. And you got James Conner, who we hate as a running back, but he's productive for some reason every year.
He gets handed the ball a lot.
So, there's a lot of spots for him to succeed in that offense early on.
Yeah.
And, like I said, we can maybe debate later if there's another exciting team to snatch him.
I think that I don't think there will be a move to get him, but I want to say that, generational wide receivers that we see every once in a while, Calvin Johnson, Julio, Jamar, these guys, the reason they fall is because of the quarterback need that most teams have. And that's what we're seeing here. 3 quarterbacks go off the board. They're not the best players in this draft. Marvin Harrison has proven that he deserves to be the number 1 player in this draft.
Right.
Year in and year out, playing this year without a amazing quarterback by any means. And you look at the guys on the screen next to him. I mean, Malik Neighbors has played with, Jaden Daniels, who's going number 2 overall. in this draft. And then you've got Rome Odunze, who played with Michael Penix Jr., who is a top 5 quarterback in this class.
Yeah.
So,
and I'll actually kind of, now that I've kind of marinated a little bit on that thought, New England, Arizona, that's the spots that we think he will for sure be going. Hypothetically, if New England knows like we're gonna move off, we want more picks, but we're gonna move back in the draft.
mm-hmm.
I think right now, because of the positions in which teams are needing a quarterback, which are basically everybody outside the top 10, and
mm-hmm.
what they'd have to give up, and being a little wary of that versus teams like the Giants and the Chargers, who are sitting at 5 and 6. A lot of teams have picking a receiver. Just needing to go up 2 spots to get that guy probably wouldn't need to give up an additional first, I don't believe, from 5 to 3. And New England could still get their quarterback because we know Arizona's not going to take them. And maybe Arizona, and that just kind of causes all kinds of chaos.
I think Arizona would probably trade there because they then don't get Marvin Harrison. Mm-hmm. But yes, I completely understand.
It can fall. It can happen. Right. I don't want to make it seem like I think there's no chance that he ends up anywhere other than those 2 teams. But right now, that's just, I feel comfortable. Arizona is where we're at. We'll listen in on New England and see what happens as the combine goes on, free agency, what direction they want to go, and we'll get a better picture. But for now, Arizona, Marvin Harrison Jr., just lock it in and just feel good about it.
I think without trades, this is probably the easiest pick. But I think on what you're saying, he's going 3 or 4. Maybe not New England or Arizona. He's going 3 or 4. Yes. Is probably the best way to put it.
Yes.
And then as we move down in this wide receiver, it's not a debacle. It's a fun and interesting class because all of the players are different. Mm-hmm. So you move to Malik Neighbors, who is going at 6 to the Giants, and the comparison between him and Odunze is very fascinating to me, watching analysts go back and forth because they're nothing alike. Mm-hmm. And that's something that a lot of people want to compare them as if they're like apples to apples. These guys are apples to oranges. One guy is more of a Tyreek Hill-esque player and takes the top off of defense, explosive route runner, great in the slot and in the outside. He does both. Slot fade was Jaden Daniels' best throw of this year by far, and it was Malik Neighbors just finding a way to get open every time. And so that's something that they're different. Rome is a really great route runner. He's 6'3" though. Think about that. He's a 6'3" route runner. Like that is hard to find. Right. He can do a lot of things, but his best thing to me is his contested catch ability. He's going to go get the ball. He's going to bail his quarterback out. Sorry, BJ. He's going to bail his quarterback out, and he did that a lot this year. And he's just a great guy to have in your locker room, I think, and somebody that depending on the team, what are you going to want?
Exactly. And that's why a lot of people stylistically are comparing him to Larry Fitzgerald, just because same build and coming out, that's exactly what Larry was. But Larry just he didn't have any drop issues and was just 1-of-1. Mm-hmm. And I think he was in a class by himself. Rome Odunze is in a class with another generational prospect. And then Malik Neighbors, who, if you want to put Odunze or Neighbors, pick your, you said, it's apples and oranges. You want an apple, you want an orange.
Yeah.
So pick your poison, but he's in the tier. And then there's the drop off.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I see. And then also I want to know what your thoughts are with a lot of times when you go to Uber passing offenses, numbers are inflated because of how spread it out it is. Maybe you're with a bunch of guys that kind of open the floor up for you. That's why Ohio State just keeps putting out first round receivers and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on, Jalen McMillan and Jalen Polk, who are also candidates to be drafted early this year?
Yeah,
the advanced metrics actually say that they were the more productive receiver, despite him being the Blindikoff winner. So how do I guess you answer that kind of concern of maybe it's not as what it seems?
So Jalen Polk is a very interesting guy. He kind of reminds me of Chris Godwin in that way. He is a number 2. He's not going to be a number 1 in the league to me. But he loves, running routes across the middle of the field. He's a tough physical guy. And that makes it very interesting. Neither of the guys that you just mentioned have the athleticism that this top tier has.
Gotcha.
And that's something that I think really stands out. Advanced metrics don't necessarily tell that story. They're not going to tell you that Adenze is going to run a 4.3, and I think that's a big thing at 6'3", 6'3", 215, running a 4.3 is pretty special type of athlete. You're just not, the other two are really good players. And both are going to go in the top 4 rounds, probably. I don't know where McMillan will go. He might stay in the 3rd round, but that's the type of class we have too. Like, when I put my rankings out, I had to do 15 players. I was like, I can't short this class because truly, I think we're going to have, 15 to 20 first and second day players in this class for wide receiver, which is
incredible.
A ton. And so I don't want to short this class of the abilities that they have. You have a generational player at number 1, 2 guys that should be the number 1 overall wide receiver and would be in most classes in these two, Neighbors and Rome. And so that's something that, I do think that, McMillan and Polk are good, but there's a lot of good players in this class. Guys that will never be number 1s, but are going to be great number 2s, run great routes. Guys that are going to be freak athletes and are going to take the top off and going to be the contested catch guys. You have your pick, your flavor of the week when you get up to draft with this class. So pick your style, kind of.
Exactly. And kind of going back to my point about productivity just being inflated because of good players being around you. I mentioned earlier wide receiver U being Ohio State and how they just keep putting out 1st round receivers and they're panning out.
Yes.
Is the bigger thing, more so than just being drafted high. They're panning out and living up to the expectations. When we saw, one of the craziest things to me in hindsight is Justin Jefferson being wide receiver 5 in his class, and CeeDee Lamb was very talented. Jerry Jeudy was very talented. I understand if that was your flavor at the time, but just I don't understand the mindset of Jalen Reagor or Henry Ruggs going before him.
Right.
Just he had the production, he had the skill set, he had the athleticism, and I think it's just like, well, you got playmakers all around you, and your stuff's a little inflated, and you're not as good as maybe it seems. And he, to me, is the best receiver in football.
Yeah.
And a lot of his teammate, Ja'Marr Chase, he didn't play his junior season because of COVID, and people actually gave him the benefit of the doubt because it's like he was the guy. And right now, to me, they're 1-2. And sometimes it's how it seems.
I think in that situation, the COVID season didn't matter almost because JJ came in and was so good. They were like, whoa, you had Ja'Marr who had 18 touchdowns. Like, maybe I think he's might be better. Right. He had more production on less catches. Well, JJ played in the slot. It's a completely different player. They're 2 different players. They're trying to use them similarly now in the league. But yeah, I don't think like Ja'Marr could take 15 targets a game. Yeah, but it's not really his style. His style is to make 1 catch and go for 80.
Right.
And do it over and over and over. And so I think that's the thing too, is like you said made Jalen Reagor, like, well, the Eagles wanted someone that was super fast and could take the top off. Well, you also want to get production and ability. You don't just want to attack guys that are just speedsters because everybody's fast in the NFL.
Yeah.
Is my thing.
Exactly.
These guys, like Malik Neighbors, I just said he's a super fast guy going to take the top off defenses. Well, that doesn't tell you anything about the nuance. His double move is amazing. I've seen him spin people around in 360s multiple times in game. Like we're watching this live and he's just, that guy goes that way and then spins. It's not like a center field turn. No, they're in man. And he's just making them like trip over themselves. Like that's different than just a guy that runs a straight line. He's making plays in a different way.
Yeah. And kind of comparing situations in recent drafts, like Devontae Smith, I don't know, based on his draft capital being a Heisman winner, I don't know if he'll ever be a wide receiver 1, but I do know that he's living up to his draft bill
Right.
And it's a lot of the reason is because of the quarterback he was drafted to and having another great
Yeah.
receiver on the other side. And then you look at Jalen Waddle, who was drafted very high. And I don't know if he can be a number one, but he's got Tyreek Hill. Rome Odunze is going to be adopted into an offense with DJ Moore, who is a
Right.
perennial 1,000-yard receiver. You got Cole Kmet, who to me is a top 10 tight end. I don't know how close into the top 10 he'd be, but I love Cole Kmet.
Yeah.
And you're going to have a rookie quarterback that is probably not going to be afraid to throw the ball. So I don't know if he'll ever be a true wide receiver one. Maybe he will, maybe he won't, but I think early on he'll at least be very productive. You look at Malik Neighbors and he goes to the Giants. It's not the best situation for a rookie receiver. And we're seeing a lot of rookie receivers pan out and put up great numbers. That's not one.
Where,
And I'm not going to pick whoever goes 2-6 to be offensive rookie of the year.
right.
That's something that I will X out
Yeah.
instantly. So I think however he pans out as a prospect, that at least he's going to go to a situation that would benefit him.
Right.
And if we flip Malik Neighbors, I'd say the same thing about him, just
Yeah.
based on the places in which they're going.
Of course. And I think these three to me have the best opportunity to be true number ones in any offense.
Mhm.
There's some guys later that we're not going to say are number ones. They're still going to be great players. They might go early second round, late first round, but they're not going to be number ones. They're
Right.
going to be twos, which every team needs a two. We talk about it. Well, we brought up Chris Godwin. Mike Evans is the one.
Mhm.
Chris Godwin's the two. Chris Godwin's been a great player for them, though. Why? Like, you have to have both to me. And so all of these guys are going to situations. And if Marvin Harrison goes at 3 to the New England Patriots, it's going to be a hard situation for him too, even knowing he's a generational player because he's got to get the ball.
Right.
So, let's move on to the tackle class. I think that this is one of the deepest tackle classes that we've seen.
Mhm.
The positional value of tackle is so important, and there are true to me personally, there is a bona fide true number one guy in this class in Joe Alt. Out of Notre Dame, came in as a tight end, played some tight end early in his career. And then they said, "Hey, can you put on 50 pounds and play tackle?" And he's like, "Sure." And guess what? He can play tackle. He's an Outland Trophy finalist, and he's just been great. So there's no, like, to me, the questions aren't with him as much. He's really good he's really good at everything. Just everything. You look across the board, he's good at all of it.
Mhm.
But the second tackle at 7 for the Titans, Olu, he's been talked about being the first overall tackle in this class. I think he plays a little tall, and he's not the best in the run game. He lacks the power in the run game that you want to see. He's built like any tackle. You could draw him as like the top. Like if you made a tackle, you built him on Madden, this is what the guy would look like right here. Olu Fashanu. Look like the tackle that you wanted on your Madden team. But he lacks a little bit of strength and power at times. And so I think that's something. It was really prominent. Really, I'm going to say really, compared to any other game. I mean, we're still talking about a top 10 tackle. But compared to any other game when he played against Ohio State, the two edges for them both went back. They both would have been top 10 edges, top 15 edges in this class. They gave him a lot of difficulty because they are power rushers.
Mhm.
They put a lot of power into their moves, and he had difficulty with that. I think he can take on speed rushers. He's got the athleticism in the feet, but sometimes the power gets to him.
Right. And kind of going back a little bit to the Chargers, they're kind of to me, that's truly where the draft starts unless there's trades, because they do have needs. And obviously the sexy pick is going receiver, but they have a lot of money already invested in that spot. And that's not really going to help solve issues that they have immediately, especially the fact that they just chose one last season. And a lot of teams typically don't go back to back unless, they truly don't have it way. Like if hypothetically the Giants chose a receiver this year, very next year I wouldn't fault them for choosing receiver because that's how much they are inept at that position. Chargers have a Pro Bowl in Keenan Allen
Right.
and Mike Williams, 1,000-yard receiver, coming off an injury. One of them will not be there, but they'll at least have one.
Mm-hmm.
And then they also have Quentin Johnston.
First round
So
rookie.
a lot of people want to peg a receiver there. It's one of the first spots for Brock Bowers, who's one of our favorite prospects in this draft. A little high, but to me, outside of left tackle, they really don't have much at that on the offensive line.
Yeah.
They lost Corey Linsley for the year and probably his career due to injury. Brian Bulago's kind of aged out, and Rashawn Slater is really all they got. And that's a great foundational piece, but can't really solve your issues. And they really need somebody else. And I don't know who between Joe Alt, hypothetically, if he lands there like we believe, versus Rashawn Slater, who would play right. Doesn't matter. The fact is you got two
bookend
and can't miss.
Generational.
And I would say it's kind of different from the Giants, where they back-to-back years went Andrew Thomas and then Evan Neal.
Mm-hmm.
One had to go to the right, but those were both prospects that we just thought were going to continue to develop.
Yeah.
Joe Alt's already ready.
Yeah.
He's already ready to be a top 10 tackle in my eyes. And Rashawn Slater's already a top 10 tackle. And so already having those guys is really easy when you're in a new situation like Jim Harbaugh will be to build your roster out, especially when you have cap issues. And establishing, the offensive line is a big priority.
Right.
In my opinion, especially with Justin Herbert the last couple of years. We had, punctured lung injuries and broken thumb, losing. That's why they are the 5th pick. It's not because of his play, So he back-to-back years dealing with injuries. You got to do something. Cincinnati has to do something.
Mm-hmm.
They can't just keep thinking that Joe Burrow is going to stay healthy and hope that it turns around.
Well, I think, you look at also like we talk about the best offensive tackle in football. And I'm not talking about Trent Williams because I think he's bona fide a best tackle in football, but he's also old.
Right.
And I'm talking about the young guy, a young buck that moved over to right tackle for the Detroit Lions in Penei Sewell. He has been possibly the best run blocking tackle and it didn't miss a beat, moved over, was fine, comfortable, and has looked great. Stands up, plays slot sometimes. Like, he's just a great athlete.
Catching passes.
Because, I don't know. It's crazy. But Joe Alt is a great athlete, too, and can do things like that. Like I said, he moved from tight end to tackle. Like, that's already a lot. That's a big change. And I think it easily could move over to the right side. Playing tight end, he got footwork for both sides also. And he's played tight end most of his career coming in through high school. So I think those things could help him also. But, I think the Chargers definitely need to get some bookends, take care of the quarterback. The wide receiver room will figure itself out. They have good receivers. And Quentin Johnston was not that. He's the number 3 to me. Behind when I believe Mike Williams is gone, he's the number 3. You have Josh Palmer, who's been really good for them and is my favorite fantasy ad.
Him. Yeah,
my favorite fantasy ad. So that's something that, adding this player helps them more than adding a receiver to me.
Yes.
And then you got Olu, and I think a lot of people are actually putting Fuaga out of Oregon State above Olu. I've seen that a lot to the Giants because he is a true right tackle.
Right. And they've got Andrew Thomas kind of established. Of the two that I mentioned before, Evan Neal is the one that struggled.
Yeah.
Andrew Thomas had some growing pains, but he's developed into their only true bright spot on that line. And so we know that they need to do stuff. They could very well take a tackle and change up our mock as well. And I wouldn't fault them for it because it's a significant need. But like I said, I can just see.
Well, I think for me, we had Andrew Thomas as our third offensive tackle on the board that year.
Yeah.
We had Mekhi Becton over him, and I'm so sorry. Who was the other one that was there? Because Tristan Wirfs was there. Yeah, Tristan Wirfs was there. That's who the other one was. Jedrick Wills was 4th for us.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I got them all. So we had him 3rd on our board, and that was because of the fact that, the growing pains. He played 3 straight years as a starter at
Georgia.
At Georgia, yeah.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it wasn't that he was a problem with that. It was the fact that we just thought that the other players were better.
Right.
And so you see the growing pains and things like that. But so you get to this next guy, and Fuaga, and he is the mauler. I mean, he is the run game mauler. And he kind of, and I'm not going to say this like in a way that all projections. Penei Sewell, when he moved over to right tackle and became a run game mauler, this is what I see. They're both similar builds, very proportional players, great hands, and when this guy shoots his hands, at times I watch people just fall to the ground in pass rush. Like, I mean, he can knock you down with just the punch, the first punch. Doesn't even move forward, just going backwards hits you because he's just so strong, so powerful, and he's hard to get around. Which is crazy. The craziest part about this year was the Pac-12 was so good at football.
It was
blew my mind.
Best I've ever seen.
Yeah, blew my mind because they're gone now. Right, the whole thing.
Yeah.
ACC was
Hell of a year to go
terrible.
out.
The Pac-12 was great. UCLA plays against Oregon State, and I watched every single snap of him versus Laiatu Latu, who is my number one edge rusher because he is just amazing. He's got all the moves. Everything you can ask for is a true pass rusher. And he had one pressure in the whole game against Latu. In the whole game. Latu had the most sacks this year. He was the Ted Hendricks Defensive End of the Year award winner. But Fuaga did great against him. So I think that kind of the question marks that we had with his pass blocking, because there were a lot to me, that was what we needed to see. And he did great. And then goes to the Senior Bowl, blocks Latu again, does great. So, I mean, this is the best edge rusher probably that we've seen. He's a little older, so he's, had that time to develop. But he's a great edge rusher, getting blocked by a great offensive tackle, going to war, and we watched, Fuaga probably won that. And so I think that that's something that is why maybe some of these analysts are putting him higher than Olu, and I can understand it. I think that the gap between Joe Alt and Olu is a lot bigger than the gap between Olu and Fuaga, because they're a lot closer to me.
So. Yeah, and then, we have Fuaga going 10 to the Jets. I think that's best case scenario for them after the way that they finished the season. All year they were between the 5 and 7 range of projected pick, and then won a couple at the end of the season to push them out to where right now they're probably in the range of the third tackle off the board, unless they were to make a move. And they were decimated with injuries this year. We talked about in our AFC East video where the second straight year as the 31st ranked offensive line, Mekhi Becton absolutely did not pan out, and the free agents that they have, they need to go offensive line. That is their true need. All 5 of their best ads this offseason need to be offensive line.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
So to me, getting a mauler, especially with a 40-year-old quarterback coming off an injury, what's the best way to kind of transition him back and try to maximize his abilities? Great run game. And having Fuaga there, that's a great stepping stone. I think that would be that would make Breece Hall fantasy managers more than happy going into the year to invest in him.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think, we talk a lot about Mekhi Becton because he gave up so many sacks, but he's pretty good in the run game. And I don't know if they'll bring him back, but if he is there,
I think he'll need to sign a prove-it deal, because you can't have 18 penalties, give up 12 sacks, go into free agency and expect a deal.
Right.
And on top of that, this was his only healthy season his entire career so far.
Yeah.
So, and usually first round prospects that a 5th-year option is declined, they typically are not cashing in when they become free agents. They have to sign a prove-it deal somewhere. And to me, it makes the most sense for him to stay.
Yeah.
We can't assume that's going to happen just because it's the nature of the beast. They have, very little cap space, but that's what I think is his best move. If that happened and you brought in somebody like Fuaga, that would be best case scenario in, I guess, the start of building that line back up to where it should be.
Especially in the run game. They would be a great tandem in the run game.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on to 11 through 20. And so got a couple quarterbacks going early. Terry Arnold to the Raiders. Latu, who we just talked about, he'll go to the Saints. And then our Brock Bowers, who is a top 5 player in our draft class, in this draft class, is going to go at 15 to the Colts. The Seahawks take edge in Jared Verse. Another corner, Nate Wiggins, goes to the Jaguars. And then a trio of offensive linemen to the Bengals, Rams, and Steelers.
Right.
So let's sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. We'll start off with the second position and go quarterback. Obviously, one of the I guess switches that we have in our prospect rankings, we have Michael Penix clearly above JJ McCarthy.
Yes,
Yet, we do. JJ McCarthy is above him in the mock draft. Why is that? Well, what I've brought up to Emory as we've been making this draft, something that makes the most sense for Minnesota is taking a quarterback that fits what they're going towards. Mm-hmm. And right now we're going to be projecting Kirk Cousins to resign after his torn Achilles, come back on a short-term deal, and finish his last year or two left that he has as a starter with Minnesota. I think it's best for both parties. And JJ McCarthy to me is the better fit to sit behind.
Yeah.
A lot of it's style, but it's also age. Michael Penix is about to be 24 to start the year. JJ McCarthy just turned 21.
Yeah.
So 3 years is such a big gap, especially at the quarterback position. And if you want to project Kirk Cousins starting for another year or even 2, Michael Penix getting his first start at 26 does not sound like a great situation to be in.
Yeah.
And then you have to realize, I have to extend him his first year as a starter. JJ McCarthy, there's a lot of growth that needs to happen, but I think he has the potential that it can happen.
Yeah.
And the best is yet to come, but he also wasn't asked to do a lot at Michigan. And I think that's what kind of brings him in a polarizing position, because he doesn't have the numbers that these other guys do,
right.
But he has a lot of teams in the NFL like him. And that's the reason that we have him above going to Minnesota, is that situation. Now, if Kirk Cousins walks, you need a quarterback star right now. I think we can agree the best person for that is Michael Penix, if you're going to go the rookie route and not the veteran route. So that's just kind of clarify how we see it shaking out at the very moment. And it could be, I'm not surprised one way or the other if it changes, or it all kind of depends on what route they want to take with Kirk Cousins. And that's where we're at with that.
Well, like you said, it's all situational. Mm-hmm. And we kind of understand that both Bo Nix and Michael Penix are going to be 24 when the season starts. And that is a situation where you need to play them. You can't ask them to sit, because you're going to get nothing out of them is the problem. And one thing though, like with Denver, they're good if they go with Penix. A lot of quarterbacks nowadays are playing into their mid 30s at least. Mm-hmm. If they're really good starters, they will play into their mid 30s. So Penix could play for a team for 10 years, and that would be a long time. He's not playing running back. And we talk about that all the time. Their age cap is 28. And with Penix, if he plays till he's 35, you still get 10 good years at him. Now, McCarthy, on the other hand, you need him to develop. He needs to work on a lot of things, and being around a veteran like Kirk Cousins, who is not his style necessarily, but a similar build, similar arm. He moves more than Kirk, and of course, I think obviously the reason Kirk's so good is IQ and preparation, and learning those types of things will make an astronomical difference in the long run. That's a lot of players we talk about all the time. Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, they all sat behind somebody prior, and now they are playing the way they are. Well, they needed that year to not be criticized, to let someone else make the mistakes, to learn. And this is a type of player that I think needs that. But he's going in the top 12 picks, so he must be pretty good at football.
Yeah, and a lot of it has to do with you being the 11th pick in the draft. You don't have to be top 5 at your position to pan out. You just need to be productive and maximize your role.
Right.
We just saw Brock Purdy, being the last pick in the draft, in his first 2 seasons, lead the San Francisco 49ers to the NFC Championship and then the Super Bowl. And arguably the NFC Championship, which they lost, getting significantly hurt. even though the game wasn't too competitive, had Christian McCaffrey not been their quarterback in the second half, it's a very different ballgame.
Right, of course.
So, and it also helps when your quarterback is being paid less than $1 million
Yeah,
in
and
this
Brock
cap.
Purdy.
But JJ McCarthy, you can be a game manager. You don't have to be a top 10 quarterback to be productive. And
Right.
all the assets that they have and the receivers that they have around them, and Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison looks like a great complement to him. TJ Hawkinson is a top 3 tight end. Once they get a run game figured out, they have a good offensive line. So Brock Purdy is able to maximize what he has because he has everything around him.
Right, of
And
course.
when you're on a rookie deal, that's what you can do is be provided with the best assets possible to succeed. And so with him, that's the best situation, is to sit, have those things, and develop properly to work out the way it should.
Um, I think too is like we're of course drafting quarterbacks, and quarterbacks normally go earlier than probably where they're positionally. I mean, not positionally ranked, but big board ranked
Mhm.
because of the value of the position. So some of these guys around them are more pro ready and ready to play football at that high level. And sometimes quarterbacks need more time, but you go and get the quarterback that you want because you think you can make him what you need him to be to win Super Bowls and win games. So I think that kind of tells the story with JJ. But now we're going to move on to our edge group that our top 3 edges. They're top 3 and then everybody else. I think that there might be another tier of one guy. It's like 3, one guy, and then everybody else. But truly, these 3 guys are the guys that everybody's debating. Nobody knows who to put number 1 overall in this class. I think probably the most that goes right now is Dallas Turner, and he's 3rd in my rankings, in our rankings for this class. So I think that kind of tells you kind of what we think will happen versus who we actually have being the best player at this position. And also, scheme fit matters a little bit. You don't want to, like we always talk about Taco Charlton over TJ Watt with Dallas. You don't want to you don't want to make a decision like that and miss because you decided to go, this guy fits a 4-3 rather than a 3-4. So in this draft, we got Dallas Turner going to the Atlanta Falcons at 8, and he's the young athlete. He's strong, good hands, athletic, and he's fast off the edge. But he has some growing things that he needs to get to. People last year were talking about him being better than Will Anderson. That is just not true. That is just crazy to think that he was the same prospect at that time or even now. I don't think that anybody would probably make that decision now when Will Anderson just became the defense rookie of the year. But that was definitely a conversation prior to now. And so I think that is kind of an important take because you want to look at guys like him as he will have to play in a stand-up role most likely. And if he puts his hand in the dirt, he's a little undersized, and that kind of could hurt his production. And that's why you have to think about the scheme fit rather than just picking a guy. TJ Watt was a lot bigger.
Yeah.
So,
and we have the combine coming up next week. In recent years, the position that's benefited the most for guys that come out of nowhere has been edge. And to me, you look at the board, he's our 3rd edge, but we have him number 1, and we're projecting that people are going to fall in love with his athleticism. He's going to test off the charts, and very big athletic, and it's the idea of what he can become that's going to make teams draft over the non-sexy Leitu or Jared Verse, and that's just kind of where we see it. Like, he's basically, I would consider it as a more productive Trayvon Walker. I don't know test-wise, numbers-wise, what he's going to put up compared to Trayvon Walker, because that's the only reason that he was number 1 overall is because of the combine. But that's kind of how I see it. Is I don't know if he can become that elite edge rusher that is needed, because in football, you start your team, you need to figure out quarterback, you got to figure out who's going to block that quarterback, you're going to figure out who's going to get the other team's quarterback.
Hmm.
And I don't know if he can be the guy that's like, oh yeah, for a decade I'm going to be off the edge
Right.
getting that guy. But there's a lot of teams in the 8 to 20 range that needs him, and it's strange because there's a lot of different styles of defenses in which they need him, and so we're trying to figure out best fit and who they might fall in love with, and that's kind of where we see it with Dallas Turner
Yeah.
going to Atlanta, and a lot of teams or a lot of mocks I've seen them want to take the best available skill guy,
Receiver.
and it's just like, guys, they went overdrafted Kyle Pitts. They just drafted a top 10 running back. They just drafted a first round receiver in 3 straight drafts. They need to take some non-sexy picks.
Yeah.
And they need to get back to winning in the trenches. Their front seven is really, really underwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to fix that. So
yeah.
that's to me the biggest true area of need for them. And they're not far off of being a very big surprise team. And solving issues like that is the best way to get over that.
Yeah, sack production will do that. I will say though, we had the conversation between Latu and Turner because Latu's pro ready.
Mm-hmm.
He walks in, he's going to walk into the Saints in this draft, and he's going to give you the production you need now.
Yeah,
and that's something that I think is possibly why he could, be at 8. But he's also older. I mean, he's going to be 23 and a half when season starts. Him and Jared Verse are. Mm-hmm. And that's another thing that you have to think about when you draft is age. And mm-hmm. so in this situation, we took age over beauty, truly.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the opposite. But yeah, so Latu has all the pass rush moves and counters, everything you're asking for when it comes to truly just being able to get after the quarterback. I mean, the number 26.2% of snaps, he created a pressure. And that tells you, incredible. I mean, yeah, every 1 out of 4, more than every 1 out of 4, he's going to make a pressure. That's just insane. And he's not playing bad teams. It'd be one thing too if he was, playing bad tackles. We just talked about it. He had 1 pressure against Fuaga. That's a whole, that's a lot of that game. Mm-hmm. And so you got to think, okay, well, take that game out. What's his pressure rate against everybody else? The other 11. Yeah, everybody else. So I think that's something that he scored the best edge score by PFF ever since they started recording. He won the Ted Hendricks Award for best defensive end. I think that, he's a bona fide All-American this year. He's at best. You could have made a case that he was the best player in football this year. He doesn't play a position that necessarily relates to that, mm-hmm. but 13 sacks is pretty great. So that's, for him to go anywhere, he's going in. To me, if he drops out of the top 20, because some teams and some people have him, flirting with that edge of the 19, 20, 21 mm-hmm. range, you are going to be getting one of the best pass rushers walking in day one. And I think that that's very important to notice is how he can impact you now. Mm-hmm. One of those later teams, that could be impacting you to get that one step into this, to get the step into the playoffs, be a top 3 team and make a run with a guy like that. So
let me ask you, obviously you're a Florida State fan, so you'll know more than most. Jared Verse coming in, I've known his name just because I look at mock drafts in the future, and 2 years ago I see his name as a top 3 pick, and then preseason he's top 5 pick, and then all of a sudden now we have him as the 3rd edge rusher off the board. He's a 2-time All-American. What happened? Why is that? Is there concern about that? Give me your thoughts on that.
So the reason he's going at 16 and not earlier and he would have gone top 10 last year. He would have been. He would have gone to the Raiders last year instead of Tyree. But the reason he's at 16 here is because he didn't go last year. He took the year. Now he's going to be a lot older. A year is a lot in this world of mock drafting. And he comes out of Albany, which first off, When he came in, I had no idea who this guy was. I didn't know he was going to be good. Anything. Comes in, has record year. Should have left and gone to the pros. Played for the Raiders this year. Would have been the opposite of Max Crosby. Would have loved it. It would have been amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't happen. The things that he didn't do, though, is he didn't improve in the same ways we were expecting. I think personally, the reason we didn't improve is because the guys around him got better. We returned a lot of players on defense. We had a lot of transfers. Um, we had 18 starters sit out of that game against Georgia. 10 of them were on defense. 10 of them either were going into the draft, right? So, like, you've got 3 corners, a safety, and then Braden Fisk, who sits right next to him, big DT that's going to be really good. So he just had better players around him, and that made it a little bit harder for him to make plays at times. But I will hopefully after this, you would go watch his highlights and just watch him take multiple, not one, multiple offensive tackles, 350, whatever, and plant them and use them as the sack. He didn't even touch the quarterback on multiple plays and sacked the quarterback with the offensive tackle. Okay, so if you're questioning his ability, he's got all the ability in the world.
Mm-hmm.
He just didn't get better, and guys around him got better. Yeah. Latu was not a guy we were even talking about at this time last year. And then he went and did the amazing things that he did.
Right.
So that's kind of
and we
thing.
saw, I don't know stylistically if he's a great or example or I guess comparing him to Jared Verse, but I think situationally it made sense. Is Will Anderson came back after his historically great season. Senior year, production was down, didn't do as well, team wasn't as great,
right?
And people are like, well, he didn't get better. So all of a sudden, being the potential first overall pick, now it's like, ooh, somebody really want to take him in the top 5. And he had a great year. He set the franchise record for sacks. And we thought, like, oh, I don't know if he'll be as productive as like that, 15 and a half indicated when he, was defensive player of the year.
Right.
And, he was. So Jared Verse could be the same example of like, yeah, maybe he didn't go the year he should have gone in hindsight, but production's still there. Tape's still there,
absolutely.
And he can still he's just a year older. And so a lot of times it's recency bias that kind of puts guys in different situations, but he could always fall into a better situation just because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that in this group, it's also kind of like, who do you like? Because it's about style too. Jared Verse is going to put his hand in the ground. He's going to be a true D end. Going to, play really. He goes really great in the run game, things like that. And actually, all these guys are pretty good in the run game. But one of them has to stand up. He's getting blocked by slots and tight ends rather than tackles. And sometimes you just need someone that can be a bookend and not let anybody around him. And that would be Jared Verse this year to me. Seattle plays that style of defense, could revamp at edge. They always have their own guy though, they always have their guy. So we'll see what happens. I think that they're always a wild card, no matter where they draft. Jordan Brooks was a crazy pick to us, and then he played really well. He was just a reach. It was just early because they could have got him in the next round. But, it just get your guy sometimes. And so they're going to do what they want to do.
Right. Yeah, he's just kind of one of those guys that we see in multiple mock drafts that are anywhere from 13 all the way to 30. Yeah. Just because really there's only 3 true edge rushers that are going to be first-round caliber prospects for the most part. Maybe one sneaks in the back half, but 3 for sure. These 3 for sure. I don't think unless there's something in the medicals that pop up, something significant happens, knock on wood, it doesn't. But these guys are solidified in the first round. Everybody else is like fringe.
Yeah.
If that. And so
just one guy.
It just kind of depends because and we're about to get into this, that 17, 18 to 25 range is just going to be littered with corners and tackles.
Yeah.
Or offensive linemen in a whole. And like I said, we'll get to it right now. But yeah, that's just kind of how that range is going to be. And if he's the third one off the board maybe he might be sitting a while, and his name gets called later. But like I said, that could be put him in the perfect situation if he uh, hypothetically fell all the way to Baltimore and then go the number one defense, and it's just like, well, that's the steal of the draft,
Absolutely.
and nobody's going to question like, why did he fall that far?
Yeah.
He just went to a great spot, and he's going to instantly contribute. So.
I think you said the medicals. I think we should also talk about that for sure.
Mhm.
Latu is great, but there's a reason he didn't do as well until now, is also because he was medically redshirted or medically retired. I'm sorry, at Washington prior, and then was transferred. UCLA cleared him to play,
Mhm.
and then he played and has had 2 seasons where he hasn't had any issues. But it was a neck injury, and that's a little scary injury. So we have to always, we're going to see what the medicals say. We're not doctors. We're going to let them do their job, and then when that comes out, that might change where he sits, not just in rankings, but on this mock draft for sure. So, all right. So please go watch part 2 of our mock draft. It'll be coming up right after part 1, and hopefully y'all can follow all our socials and do everything. We really want to build this community in the right way, and so please like, subscribe, and comment on this video if you disliked your pick or whatnot. We completely understand, and we're willing to listen. Give us a logical explanation of why, and yeah. No. All right, guys. Thank you.